Well, welcome to Graham MacDonald, the next mayoral candidate to join us as we speak from a perspective of Operation Come Home. Graham, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, let's just begin with tell me a little bit about yourself and what was it that made you decide to run for office and specifically the big chair of mayor right off the bat.
Yeah. So my for 10 years I was the CEO of a corporation here in Ottawa, and it was a mortuary actually based company. So in that regard, we were contractors with the coroner's office as well. So we would attend to every, suicide, overdose, car accident, homicide, whatever it be. We were sort of the go-to with the coroner's office to go and assist the police. But going back to my position there as CEO for 10 years, I was exposed to a lot of the darker underbelly of our city. And, after 10 years of doing that, I was just like, you know what, I got to be able to do more on a bigger scale before we get to these moments where I'm standing on these scenes and stuff, like there's so much more that I think that we could be doing that we're not doing. And that's just, and coming from the underbelly of the city, working there, I got the the experience of being right there, seeing it with my eyes, and actually affecting me and bothering me, enough to be like, okay, we need to do something here. Like this is out of control, right? So I left that position, and about 2 years ago, and for the past year, I've sort of been gearing up for this. I think that shooting for the mayor's seat with the issues that actually concern me is where I can actually, you know, make an impact, not just concern me, but concern the city. When you start looking around at people that are homeless, around the city, people, drug addicts around the city, it's just sort of falling apart here, and I think that everybody is catching on at this point. They're just like, yeah, we got to do something, so I feel like, the mayor's seat is the seat to actually take on those big, huge challenges, to actually come up with some solutions.
Well, I think you're right. I think we're at a crisis point in many, many regards, right? We're at a crisis point in terms of affordable housing.
Mhm.
There just isn't enough. The affordable housing that we do have, we're losing. We're not building more affordable housing on a scale that can make up for it. Fentanyl is a crisis that is hitting, you know, we keep thinking it's a breaking point, but it gets worse and worse and worse. There doesn't seem to be any kind of respite on the horizon for that overdose crisis as well. Now, just before we came on here, you were talking to me about putting together a team looking into mental health in particular. And this is something that we talk about a lot at Operation Come Home, right? The notion that drug use and mental health are interchangeable. They're basically synonymous, right? That the more people end up using drugs, the more mental health issues they have. And the more mental health issues they have, the more likely they are to start using drugs. And I've been telling a lot of the candidates that I've been speaking to is, at Operation Come Home, we deal with youth. So mostly young people, right? 16 to 25 in that area. And the people that come to Operation Come Home almost never show up at our doors because of drug use, right? They don't end up on the street because they were using drugs. Maybe they get kicked out of their house because their parents catch them smoking a joint or something. But generally speaking, they don't have that stereotypical path, right? Where people think that, you start using drugs, you start spending all your money on that, you don't have money for rent, you get kicked out, you end up living on the street. None of our youth have that experience. But what they do have is the experience of, once you're on the street, the mental health issues that come along with that really hard life lead to drug use, because it's the most available escape from the day-to-day reality. And it's right there. Same with drinking, right there, it's available, it's an escape. And so mental health, I think it all comes down to the core of this. You're telling me you're putting together a team. Just tell me about that process. What does that process look like in that team coming together to look at what we can do for mental health here in Ottawa?
Yeah, well, I think, a group of specialists that actually have been involved with, uh, you know, specifically like youth overdosing, and youth homelessness, bringing them all together. There's a couple of advocates as well that are coming on board. We're putting a plan together. We need to see more beds for, youth and adults as well, dealing with the like going back to the fentanyl crisis that we're in, like I know that crisis still, just as well as a lot of the police and everybody else sort of downtown. And, you know, it's, it's frightening. And like you say, with all three, mental health, you got overdoses and you got homelessness. That's a slippery slope, right? The minute you're into one, it's a very slippery slope. And the three of them are always, nearby, right? Like it's always one leading into the next, like you mentioned. And, so if you have a team together of actual professionals that know what's going on and what we can do to help, I'm not saying that the city doesn't have a lot of services out there, for mental health and homelessness. Don't get me wrong. But, we don't really have anyone that can tell us what's working, what's not working, where we can put funds that might be better off, stuff like that. So, bringing a team together like this, I'm a big collaborator guy coming from a CEO. I'm used to working with a board of directors, right? Board of directors, this is what we want to do. CEO, okay, I'll action it. And so that's the approach we're taking with this because it really is a crisis. So we got to do what we have to do for sure.
No doubt. And there's sort of two parts to it, right? There's the long-term solutions and then short-term solutions because mayor's race is up in October, and as soon as that's done, we're into the cold winter months, and there are a lot of people who are homeless who weren't a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a situation that's getting worse. We've got tent encampments set up that really aren't sustainable through the winter months. So just in terms of some sort of short-term solution for that, while we are at this crisis point, what are your thoughts on what we can do over the course of the winter just to alleviate that in the near future?
Yeah, again, that's sort of where that team building comes into. There's obviously shelters around, but they're obviously way past capacity as well too. Maybe we have to look at making opening some other shelters up around the city to accommodate the extra needs that we have right now, specifically coming out of the pandemic, and then like you say, leading up to winter, like people can't just be outside all the time, right? So again, that team is going to bring those ideas together, and I think obviously we need more shelter for sure, but obviously more affordable housing as well, and like really affordable housing, not like affordable for people that are working full time or stuff like that. That's obviously important too, but like we need a real solution for people on the streets, battling mental health, battling homelessness. That team is, I hope, will bring that all together for me.
Right. And there ends up being sort of a, a disconnect there, right? When you say what is affordable housing really, right?
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
mean, is it somebody who works 40 hours a week at minimum wage should be able to live in a house? Well, one would think yes, but then does that mean we have to bring the cost of the house down, subsidize that house, or raise the amount of minimum wage in order to make it affordable for somebody to do that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there are just so many factors that connect. One of them, and as the CEO of a corporation for 10 years, right? You obviously are more in tune to economic realities than many others in terms of the way the economy is going up and down, right? Shareholders and that sort of thing. So right now, we're in another crisis, which is inflation, right? Inflation is making everything that much more expensive. And we used to do a thing, and we still do. We're going to be doing it again in February, and we call it the $24 challenge. So we set this up many years ago. And what we did was we took one of the youth who comes to Operation Come Home, and she had been housed. So she had the maximum amount available under Ontario Works, the maximum available under the city's housing subsidy that they provide. And she had a part-time job, I think worked minimum wage. I can't remember exactly how many hours, but 15 to 20, somewhere in there, right? Trying to get another job, right? This was the main expense that she had, was trying to get clothes so she could get into interviews, so she could get another job and do better and move up. And so we took all of the expenses that she had and all of the income that she had through these various sources, right? Which even included the low income bus fare program City of Ottawa has.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of every week, she had $24 left for food. And so that was what we would spend for a week, just to show people how difficult it really is, especially, week to week living on something like that. when we started it again, we brought it back in 2020 when the pandemic hit, because all of a sudden we needed a fundraiser that wasn't outside. We used to do an outside one and a bunch of
Right.
people together in one place, right? And so we did the calculation again, and it was around $24. Then 2021, 2022, if we were to do the same now, it would be a negative number. Ontario Works hasn't gone up. The subsidy that the city's providing hasn't gone up in an appreciable way, and it certainly isn't commensurate with inflation. And in fact, the minimum wage that was, $14 an hour or whatever it was a couple of years ago hasn't gone up either, right? So
Mhm.
the cost of the apartment has gone up, the cost of the food has gone up, the cost of heating and all the rest of it, except all of the supports haven't. So, you know, just I know that's a huge question, and I'm asking a lot
Mhm.
of things all at once, right? But but it is all connected, right? So
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I don't think that we can say that inflation's going away anytime soon, that we're
Mm.
going to have any sort of respite from that. So how can we connect those things all together and provide a situation where people shouldn't have to worry about losing their housing or about not being able to feed themselves, right? The food banks are as overwhelmed as the shelters are right
Hmm. Yeah, and I'll go back to that slippery slope too that we were talking about before. Let's say someone does get, manages to get into a living situation like that person you're just mentioning. Well, now there's another roadblock. You know what I mean? You only got $24 left at the end of the week, and you're trying to get another job or something like that and get more clothes. Like you're not, like it's just there's constant roadblocks in the way here. I think that between the municipality and the province, we need to take a real deep look at, how much we're actually, giving them cold hard cash to make their lives better for themselves and their families in some instances. So I think that, it's obvious that inflation is through the roof. Even if it comes down, I don't know if it'll ever come down to where we were at, prior to the pandemic or anything like that. But it's imperative that the city act and the province act too on increasing ODSP for folks, and the cities again with the services the city's offering. I'm not saying they're not great, but I think we could be doing a lot more with them. Part of my platform too is I really think that we need to urge council to appoint a temporary, even it could be temporary or permanent, mental health officer. All right. Right now we have a medical officer of health, right? When there's something, to do with people's health, this representative comes out and they speak on behalf of what we should be doing and the services that are working and everything, right? When it comes to mental health and homelessness, there's nobody held accountable. There's no one to hold accountable to it. There's no one that we can, pull out and have a conversation with and be like, is these services working? Is what's not working here? Put more money here, more money there. That I've sort of been preaching the mental health officer, but it starts up there with accountability in order to, you know, uh, to get to where it needs to go, and to be efficient and to actually work. You know, so
right.
that's one of my big things there.
I like that. I mean, Canada's just done the same thing nationally, right? We have
Hmm.
appointed a national mental health person to
Hmm.
spearhead all of that. And I think too that we're starting to realize and starting to move in a direction where we realize that mental health and physical health are not two separate things, right? That they are
Hmm.
very much intertwined. That as your mental health goes, so goes your physical health, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just maybe a little example of that, right? Somebody who's in chronic pain, who excuse me, has a condition that causes them chronic pain. Well, if you're in pain 24/7 every day, it's going to affect your mental health in a dreadful way. And like everything else that we're talking about, that spirals and it gets
Yeah.
worse and worse, and one thing worsens the other, and so forth. So I think that, yeah, approaching mental health from the same perspective that we do physical health is a
Hmm.
great thing for Ottawa and for municipalities around the world
Hmm.
to decide to do the way that Canada has sort of done, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not speaking ill of the city's medical officer of health by any means, but when someone has a mental health issue, they go see their doctor, and their doctor usually refers them over to a professional, right? A psychologist or psychiatrist to actually pick up the ball and keep it rolling, right? We got to treat this the same way. It's just it seems like it's out of control at this point. And back to your other point there, body health for sure. Even someone that's living on the street, they obviously don't have money to eat healthy, have a healthy lifestyle eating. You know what I mean? So then, like you
Right.
say, the body starts to fall apart. It's a slippery slope. Every connection to all that is the slipperiest slope ever, and it just keeps snowball. The snowball just keeps getting bigger as it goes down the hill.
Right. And the longer someone spends on the street, the worse all of that becomes. And we get volunteers to come in on Operation Come Home quite often and cook breakfast for our youth, right? We have a
Mhm.
drop in the morning, they come in for breakfast, and everyone is constantly stunned at how, excited and receptive the youth are for salads and fruits and, things of that nature, because they just don't get that anywhere else. That's not
Yeah.
something that, one, if you are housed, you have an apartment, you can't afford that stuff because it is more expensive. And two, when you're out and you just need to get something in your stomach, you're going to go for the cheapest option, which generally speaking isn't fresh vegetables and healthy food, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, it definitely spirals in that regard. Now, the one thing I would say with all this, right, is that, and we try to make this point a lot, that it's way more expensive for somebody to live on the street for a year, for 2 years, for even 6 weeks than it is to actually physically house that person, right? We could cover all of their rent and all of their expenses, their meals and everything in an apartment, and it's still going to be cheaper for us as taxpayers than
Mhm.
it will be for that person to be on the street. But that involves every level of government, right?
Yeah.
The healthcare system, provincial, right? The municipal police system and provincial police system and the national police system, all involved there, all costs associated with it. So, what do you think about? I mean, do you have a plan for working with other levels of government to address this altogether, right? Because it does need to be an all hands on deck approach if we're going to save money across uh, all all levels.
100%. Yeah. It's 100% collaboration between the city, province, and the federal government for sure. That all the wheels have to be turning at the same time here in order to actually get a handle on this crisis for sure. No doubt.
Yeah. Now, do you have a specific plan for reaching out to provincial governments, to federal governments, or is that something that also you're going to be looking at with your panel of experts you're putting together?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to say anything that, I can't back up right now for sure, but that again with that panel in place, that'll be a key of that, especially we're talking about, facilities to, put beds in and stuff like that. That's what we've been talking about right now, So we're talking, major investments as well too, that the city is going to rely on the province and the federal government for sure as well.
Now, the federal government's plan is the Housing First plan. They put a lot of money into this, money that isn't necessarily being spent as well as we might like it on the municipal level, even provincial level, everywhere, right?
Mhm.
But the notion with Housing First is, of course, that before you can get help for your drug use, for your mental health issues, for all of this other stuff that comes together, right? Your underemployment and poverty, the rest of it, you need to have a house, right? You need to have somewhere where you can call your own.
Mhm.
Can't really get a job without an address. You can't really, do any of the things that we all take for granted unless you have that stability of a home life. Um, where am I going with this? So
Uh,
that's the federal government program. And I guess where I'm going with this is it's almost, and what we advocate is a scattered housing approach, so that it's not just building a building that's another shelter and gets homeless people off the street, because that really is more about getting them away from the eyes of the public than it is actually helping them in some way, because you're kind of warehousing them, right? So a
mhm.
scattered approach means that throughout Ottawa, right? Some in Barhaven, some in Canada, some in Orleans, some in Vanier, some in Hintonburg, right? Little places here and there where people can choose where it is that they want to live, which gives them a much greater chance of success once they're there. So, on this team of people that you're building, do you have developers, people who actually build these kind of residences? Because I'm not sure that we can get there without them.
Yeah, I know the people that are coming on board. We're still putting it all together. I know some of them actually have experience doing that as well. That's for sure. Now, one thing I sort of want to go back to, as much as new ideas and everything are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But something else we have to consider too is what we can do to sort of there's been people that have been people that are living in Ottawa housing and stuff like that who have gone years to get to where they are, right? Like progressively getting better, better opportunities in life and everything else. So we also have to keep in mind that if we reach down and just help those people up and bring them out of the community housing and stuff like that, that sort of brings up a little bit extra space to bring people in like new people in, so we can't forget that we have to keep in mind the opportunities that people need, just that are just on the cusp of sort of coming out of that, being able to manage their own lifestyle and have a job and provide everything they need. So something to remember there is we just some people just need a little extra helping hand too to get them out of that system, which creates more room at the bottom of it to come up and in.
A rising tide lifts all boats, as it were. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, that said, a lot of our community housing is in atrocious shape, right? It's really dilapidated. It's broken down. It's not a place that most people would ever want to live. So that kind of has to be part of the solution too, right?
Yeah, 100%. I've been in and out of hundreds of those units, when I was working, going in, people that have passed away or, other, suicides or overdoses, or that all happens in those units as well, right? And that it's some of them are just unbelievable is actually like a good word for it. Like you couldn't fathom someone actually living in it.
Yeah. So what then is some, I mean, is it worth pouring the money into those places that it would require to bring them back up to what one might consider a livable standard, as part of the overall plan? Or is there a better plan to just move people into the places that they want to live overall, right? As you said, getting people out of those units in the first place is great, but then you're asking somebody else to move into a terrible place.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of pouring a lot of money into that?
Uh, I'm in favor of taking a look at it for sure. There's something to be said about the human spirit when, if you're coming into your first impression, right? Say you're moving into this unit and it looks like a dive. You're not going to have very positive vibe off it, right? And a positive flow to keep moving forward. It's little things like that that keep spirits up and keep people going, right? So they come in and the place looks, as long as it has a fresh coat of paint and some clean carpet or clean flooring and stuff's relatively clean, I think that goes a long way in assisting people to get to where they want to as well. Now, I definitely have to take a look at, the dollar signs to go along with fixing up or renovating or cleaning everything. I don't know what that would look like right now.
And that's fair. I mean, whatever we end up doing is going to come with an enormous, right? If we really want to tackle homelessness, it's going to come with an enormous upfront cost, right? And trying to translate that for voters to say, like, listen, yeah, we're going to have to spend a number that seems astronomical to you right now, but it will save money. In fact, not just in the long term, but in the short term as well, because housing people is cheaper than letting them live on the street. It simply is. And that's, the way it's been for a long time. Is that something that when you're thinking about messaging, right, as a mayoral candidate and you're trying to talk to voters who may be apprehensive at the notion of such a big number, is that something that you're thinking about in your messaging as you as you prepare for this?
Yeah, it is something I'm thinking of. Again, my experience going in and out of these places is, I've been in the worst of the worst, and it's it's hard, when you, if, can't help but wonder, like, if I was in that situation, it's like, I think I would actually rather live in a park in a tent or something. You know what I mean? Like, than in some of this housing that we have, So, it will be part of my messaging, once I sort of get dollar signs and stuff like that. Obviously, what people have to keep in mind though is what we fix, with dollars in homelessness does actually have a side effect of assisting people with mental health, as well as assisting people with overdose, or drugs. That's it's again that trifecta of everything, right? They're all connected all the time. So whatever we can do to put someone in a house actually might get them off of drugs,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like,
Which is
and
the idea. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then, when they're off the drugs and they're in their house, their mental health starts to, get better, and the place is clean, the mental health is better. So, it's dollars towards homelessness and putting people in affordable homes, but it's also the side effect of that, which is fantastic to have a positive side effect from that, is it helps people with mental health, and it helps people with drug situations as well.
No doubt. And one of the things that we're, of course, in huge favor of is harm reduction in general, right? Safe injection sites, safe supply, all this sort of thing that, the city's kind of looking at right now. Maybe expanding that a little bit, or maybe, providing a safe supply, just because, right? When you're on the street telling somebody, well, before we're going to give you a house, you're going to have to kick this addiction that you have, is a non-starter, right? You're on the street, and that's really why you have the addiction. So very few people are capable of just jumping through all those hoops in order to get the house, right? So this is the housing first idea. Now, the one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough, and so I just want to talk about it a little bit here. And I don't really have a question for you as such, but uh, marginalized people tend to be, of course, homeless a lot more often than others, right? The indigenous population is way overrepresented in homeless populations, and so is the LGBTQ2S plus community as well. We ran a survey recently of our employment programs, and we know that we have more LGBTQ youth per capita than the regular population by a huge margin in our drop-in already, right? But we ran this survey in our employment programs, and 40% of the youth who were trying to find a job through Operation Come Home identified as lesbian, gay, or transgender. Uh, I think one was non-binary as well, right? But these are some of the issues that push youth into homelessness in the first place. And I've been bringing this up with the other candidates because, right, you're running for mayor. There are other races happening at the same time, right? City councilors and so on. And there are two people at least, and possibly more, running for school board trustee right now on a very specifically anti-trans platform, that we want to stop teaching our children anything about gender at any stage during school altogether, right? Which is something that's super impactful on the youth that we serve, because it makes them look outside the community that they've formed at Operation Come Home and go, the outside world doesn't even want me to exist, right? So I don't really have a question around that. I want people to sort of be aware of this, but do you have any thoughts on that as part of this election that's happening right now?
Yeah, for sure. I can totally relate. Okay. So actually, my late 20s, when I was living in Centertown. I lived in Centertown for about 6.5 years, and like, I was bisexual at that time, and running a business, running a corporation at 72 staff, and I still, during that time, I still had that, I can't say anything to anybody. I'm
Right.
39 years old now. You know what I mean? I can say it now or whatever, but at that time, in my position I was in, I had a house, I was getting paid, I had everything, and I still struggled with that same thing. There's, you know, there's ways to approach it. I think with school, we have to remember that children are very impressionable, and they need to know that they can do whatever, they can do whatever they want. The sky's the limit.
Mhm.
But that's a tricky one. But I know from my own experience that, even looking back at it now, I still, I look back on it and I'm like, I still don't know where I would have seen my outlet to be able to discuss that with anybody, even. You know what I
Right.
mean? Outside of like my family or whatever. But and your family, families, God love them, but they're always, you could be like, I burned my house down, and your mom would come up and be like, well, dear, you're just, you're still the best in my mind, right? And so, eventually you start, wanting to talk to other people about other things, and not necessarily family. Because I'm not the type of guy, like, I don't want to say something and be patted on the back and be like, well, it'll be okay. It's like, no, let's do something here. Let's come up with a solution. I don't necessarily have all the solutions, but let's bring in the people that do. And so I would
Mhm.
be, I would like to see, more effort at, in the city as to address those issues, with schooling and stuff like that. Um, you know, I, th- I think we have other issues as well that, with when it comes to children, specifically right now in schooling. And I'll take it back to sort of the mental health aspect, with kids, wearing masks and everything like that. To each their own. Everyone can do whatever they want. That's not my issue. But when we have masks on children, I remember when I was a kid, and you're learning to socialize, and your social cues and stuff like that were usually coming from the mouth. You're going to go up to talk to someone, they're smiling or whatever. And so that's been hitting me hard, over the past couple of years, seeing that. And that really concerns me. I would say that concerns me, more than with what you're talking about here.
That Sorry, that kids are wearing masks at school concerns you?
Well, no, just like the I guess the amount of time that's passed while it's been going on. I'm not saying that it wasn't beneficial to do, and it is beneficial to do, but there's a side effect that goes with that, as children developing and learning how to socialize, and social cues and stuff like that. I definitely don't have an issue with anybody wearing a mask. You can wear whatever you want. But I can foresee that being an issue going into the future, in the next few years, for sure, as these children continue to grow up and flourish. I sort of see possible issues with that.
That could be. And my day job is with the Canadian Psychological Association. So we've been talking about this for, obviously years now, right?
Yeah.
And, and the general consensus seems to be that, no matter what damage wearing a mask to school might do, it's less damage than if grandma dies of COVID, right? Like that could be a much worse situation for the kid. But tying it all into the mental health thing, right? And what we were talking about a moment ago, our youth, the LGBTQ plus youth or whatever, they're having an especially tough time through COVID because school has always been a sort of safe outlet for them, especially universities where there are campus clubs, there are, peer groups that people can identify with, can hang out with, can spend in-person time with. Well, when you're stuck at home, maybe you're in a home that doesn't accept you at all for the way that you are, and maybe you can't be yourself in your house. So you're not only stuck at home, but you're also stuck playing a character that isn't you. And the mental health effects of that have been really, really devastating over the last couple of years. And, certainly for young kids, right? They seem to be resilient. We're hoping that this doesn't last forever, but it doesn't seem like it's getting better anytime sooner at the moment, right? Our hospitals are having a terrible time. The number more deaths now than there ever were with COVID, right? Like the pandemic is in no way over. So that's I guess short and long term. What do you do about that? That's
Yeah. But you know what? As long as we're, not ignoring it, like, as long as it can be addressed, in the future, like, proactively, you know what I mean? I don't know how that's done, mind you, but if we can just at least, acknowledge that there might be an issue here, and then we can just at least watch for it and see what happens, and then maybe try to get ahead of it, if it does pop up in the next few years, you know. I'm a
Bro,
big
for sure.
proactive guy. I'm a big proactive guy for sure.
Yes, yes. I think we do need to be proactive about a lot of these issues. The problem is that so many of them we haven't been, and now they're
Exactly.
all at a crisis state, all in the same time, and dealing with one means dealing with the other, and all of it, right? All of it's happening at once, and it's super unfortunate. I feel like COVID would have given us an opportunity to really be proactive about all of these things. Okay, everyone's stuck at home. We have to reimagine the way we live our lives, the way we do everything. So why couldn't we have got out ahead of all of these things instead of letting them fester and trying to pretend that a lot of it doesn't exist until all of a sudden, we're at this crisis point. Anyway, I'm terribly sorry. This is going to cut us off super rudely in
No
30
worries.
seconds if I keep talking,
No worries.
because I'm cheap and I have the free Zoom. But
That's all
thank you.
right. Me too.
Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And